Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today I'm going to be doing a brand new original tag, and this is one that I have created. I'm calling this the Windows and Mirrors Reading Tag. I've talked frequently on the channel about a metaphor that informed my development of a literature curriculum in my career of almost 40 years as a high school English teacher. And it is this same metaphor that I think I continue to apply to my own reading today. Early in my teaching career, I had the great fortune to work with, to study with a really brilliant educator named Emily Style. She published her theory of curriculum as window and mirror after a conference that was held at the school where I was teaching as a very young teacher. Emily said that curriculum needs to function as both window and mirror in order to reflect a multicultural world. She wrote about students needing to be able to look through window frames to see the realities of the lives of others. But additionally, she said, students also need to be able to look into mirrors as well to see their own reality reflected as part of a larger human experience. Well, I think these metaphors can easily be transferred to one's own reading. So I've created this Windows and Mirrors reading tag. I hope that everyone watching will consider giving this one a go and talking about some of the important books in our lives. There are just a few prompts. There are really 4 prompts, and then the 5th one is to tag others. So the first prompt is to talk about a book or a few books that served as a mirror to you. Allowing you to see some aspect of your own life experience reflected in a meaningful way. Well, the first book that I want to talk about will probably come as no surprise, and that is J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. And I think I actually haven't talked about this in quite a while. This is a novel that I first read when I was 13 years old, and I certainly thought then that it reflected something about my life. I identified with Holden Caulfield. But as I would go on to become an English teacher and to actually teach this novel for many years, I was still able to see my experience reflected in the novel as well as the experiences of my students. In addition to being an English teacher, I am also a therapist, and I have continued to think that The Catcher in the Rye is an absolutely brilliant portrait of teenage depression, teenage trauma, and the effects of very serious grief on adolescent development. I do not think Holden Caulfield is a whiny teenager. He is a young man who is having a complete breakdown, and he's telling the story from a psychiatric hospital where he has gone after having this complete breakdown. And he's suffering from horrific grief from the death of his little brother, which no one in the family seems to be able to talk about with him. So I continue to see this as a book that reflects my experience and reflects the experience of a number of teenagers that I have known throughout both of my careers. Another series of books that come to mind, and I first encountered early in college. And these are the Kate Fansler Mysteries by Amanda Cross. I just brought a couple to show for this video: The James Joyce Murder and The Players Come Again. I've done a separate video on Amanda Cross. Amanda Cross is the pen name for Carolyn Heilbrunn, who was an English professor at Columbia University. But she wrote this murder mystery series under a pen name because she thought that if she wrote under her own name, Carolyn Heilbrunn, that she probably would have been denied tenure in an all-male English department back in the 60s, and she was probably right. I first encountered the Kate Fansler mysteries, I think, in my sophomore year of college, and I just fell in love with this character. Kate Fansler is an English teacher. She's an English professor, and she solves mysteries largely through her her in-depth knowledge of literature. And while I'm not out there solving mysteries, I certainly identified with this English teacher character. Another book that I read recently, about a year ago, that I also felt in an odd way reflected my life, was Donald Ryan's The Queen of Dirt Island. And this is a novel that takes place in Ireland, and it's the portrait of several generations in an Irish family. But it spoke to me in a really powerful way, perhaps because I read it just before I was about to make my first trip to Ireland. But characters in this book reminded me deeply of characters in my own life. And the grandmother character in this novel reminded me of my own beloved Irish grandmother. So while I probably don't really have much in common with the characters in this book, and I was not raised in Ireland, I felt like this book was talking about generations of my own family. Another novel that I identified with powerfully was an earlier novel by Liz Moore, and this is Long Bright River. Now this is it's a mystery, and it is a police procedural, and that probably would not indicate that it would have a whole lot to do with my life, but the main character in here who is a police officer, spends a good part of the novel looking for her sibling. She's looking for her missing sister, who has fallen victim to, horrific addiction. And the idea of being a sibling who is trying to rescue another sibling from the grip of addiction is something that speaks very powerfully to me. And while I probably have little in common with most of the characters in this book, it also spoke to me on a very deep personal level. Okay, next, talk about a couple of booktubers whose reading is most like your own. The first one that I'm going to mention is Angelia at Read and Reread. We do have very similar reading tastes. Angelia was also the first booktuber that I ever discovered. She's largely responsible for my having a booktube channel. And we joke about the fact that we sometimes feel like we are sharing a brain because we're on the same page so frequently, and we can kind of, we read a lot of the same books and the same kind of books, and we have very similar experiences, and we can even finish each other's sentences sometimes. Next, I would mention Debs at Rainer Reads Stuff. Debs and I are, we joke as we respond to each other's weekly wrap-ups that we're sort of like making the same videos, because we're reading all the same books, we're participating in all of the same events, although Debs participates in many more events than I do. But we have she has, I think, even broader tastes than I do, but all of my tastes are tastes that she has as well. I think Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading is another booktuber who has very similar tastes to mine, especially in our reading of the classics. Tracy at Tracy's Nordic Lights. Tracy and I have also recently discovered our many parallels in terms of our interests, certainly in terms of classics, but also in terms of poetry. We both bring a great interest in poetry to our channels. Melinda at A Web of Stories is a booktuber whose tastes are also very similar to mine. There are a couple of authors where she's a completist, where she's read everything. William Kent Kruger is one. Louise Penny is another. But these are favorite authors of mine as well. We just have a lot of very similar tastes. Renee at Beyond Books, also one of my very early discoveries here on BookTube. We are women of a certain age, and I think we're drawn to similar books. Although Renee has read a lot more thrillers than I have read, but we do seem quite frequently to be drawn to similar similar types of books. Maria Andrea at Books and Bocadillos has a deep interest in poetry, and she features poetry a great deal on her channel. So that's something that we've had in common from the very beginning. Kim at Middle of the Book March, who is on a little bit of a break right now, but Kim is also someone who talks about books that are similar to the books that I talk about on my channel, and I think we both have a deep interest in the classics as well. So those are a few that come to mind as other booktubers that I consider as kind of mirrors with similar tastes to mine. Okay, question number 3. Talk about a few books that serve as windows to you, allowing you to see the reality of others outside of your experience. Well, the first author that I'd like to talk about is Maya Angelou. I first discovered I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings when I was very young, and this was my introduction to Maya Angelou, and that set me on a course of reading the subsequent volumes to her autobiography, and also her poetry as well. I didn't feel like I had much in common with the young Maya who is depicted in this autobiography, but I felt like I was walking around in her world with her, and it was a very powerful experience, and it set me on a new reading course. One of my favorite authors of all time is Toni Morrison, and her books always hold up a window frame into important life experiences of others that are very different from my life experience, but these are experiences that have made me feel profound empathy. I think the first book of Toni Morrison's that I discovered was The Bluest Eye, and that was followed soon thereafter by Sula. These are very old copies, but I would go on. I've read. I haven't read everything that she's written, but I've read a lot. Tar Baby, Song of Solomon, and Beloved. Another book that was a very powerful experience for me of seeing the world through someone else's eyes and walking around in their world would be Tracy Kidder's Rough Sleepers. And I was actually introduced to this book last year when I was a BookTube Prize judge. And this was I read this in the first round of nonfiction. This is Dr. Jim O'Connell's Urgent Mission to Bring Healing to Homeless People. This is a nonfiction book about Dr. Jim O'Connell and his life's work as a physician to the homeless in Boston. And this opened up a whole new world to me, and just in a very, very powerful way that made me feel tremendous empathy for this population that O'Connell has devoted his life to, really, and just also caused me to feel tremendous respect and admiration for this doctor and this entire crew that worked with him of other physicians and nurses and physicians' assistants as they would go around to bring medical care to the homeless where they were. Okay. Number 4, talk about a couple of BookTube channels that have expanded your horizons, helped you to explore books or genres outside of your comfort zone, or challenged you in some other way. Well, in terms of expanding my horizons, there are a couple of booktubers that I would like to talk about. Long before I had my own BookTube channel, I discovered Michael K. Vaughan, and I began reading science fiction, which was a genre that had completely escaped me. And I've talked about this many times on the channel. But I discovered that Michael K. Vaughan had developed a science fiction starter kit to introduce people to classics in the science fiction genre. And I read my way through his starter kit, and I really haven't stopped reading. I mean, I'm continuing to read classics and vintage science fiction, and I'm also reading contemporary and more modern science fiction as well. And then after discovering Michael K. Vaughan, and once I had my own channel, I discovered several other people that I continue to follow who have just broadened my horizons in the science fiction genre. And they would be Grammaticus Books, and Shandi Standfast, and Gavin at Genre Books, and Gareth at Books, Songs, and Other Magic. And Gareth and I have been doing buddy reads in science fiction, in some cases where he's rereading things because he just wants to reread them with someone who's reading it for the first time. And we've just had really a wonderful time with that, and I've learned so much from him. And also I would add Richard Rempel at Vintage SF. I've learned a great deal from Richard as well about vintage science fiction especially. And then another booktuber who has expanded my horizons and whom I've just learned a great deal from is MJ at Reading This Life. In addition to saving me and saving my channel in my early days when I really didn't know what I was doing at all, and when I was badly trolled in my first weekend on BookTube, MJ came to my rescue, but she has also expanded my horizons in terms of my reading. Last year, when we were having horror mayhem, and I wanted to participate, but I was terrified, it was MJ who gave me some suggestions of things that I might read that would allow me to participate, but not overwhelm me and not keep me up at night. And she introduced me to T. Kingfisher, who quickly became just another one of my top authors, like one of my auto-buy authors now, someone whose work I just really, really like. And I've gone on to some other horror authors as well, because of MJ. So she is responsible for my making this foray into another genre that had really almost entirely escaped me. Now, there are also a couple of channels that I would just like to mention because they have challenged me in some way. They may not have necessarily changed what I read or caused my reading to go in a different direction, but they have given me things to think about as I choose what I want to read next. I have done some buddy reading with Lectin at Reading from the Depths, and we read a couple of books together, and we're going to be reading more together in the future. But Lectin brings a very interesting perspective to his BookTube channel. Lectin is a Buddhist monk, and he brings a very, very unique perspective to his analysis of his reading. He's created a couple of really thought-provoking original tags, which have caused all of us to do some really deep thinking about what we're reading. And so Lectin is certainly a booktuber who has challenged me. Thomas at Art and Lit Matters is another booktuber who continues to challenge me every day. He was the mover and shaker behind the T.S. Eliot read-along last month, and his videos where he talks about art and literature and the intersection of art and literature always give me things to think about as well. My dear friend Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics has really challenged me because he has brought me back to James Joyce. And as you know, if you've been watching my channel at all, I've been reading James Joyce seriously for the last year, more than the last year, and Alan's really responsible for that. Margaret Pinard, who just did a really brilliant series for the month of August. She created something called Agitation August, and throughout the month she featured different booktubers who were reading books that stirred them up in some way. It was a brilliant series. I was really honored to have been invited to be a part of it, a small part of it, but all of the people that she featured throughout the month just gave everyone so much to think about with regard to the world that we're living in today. And also, I would like to mention Carl at Please Read Your Book, who is making really, really intelligent content where he is encouraging people to read bravely, and to seek out books that might make us a little bit uncomfortable. And he's just given me a great deal to think about with everything that I choose to read. So he would certainly be someone who has challenged me as a reader. Okay, so those are the 4 tags, and the 5th one is simply to tag others. If you're watching and you'd like to jump in on this, please, I would love to see this tag spread, and I'd love to hear about your windows and mirrors, so please consider yourself tagged. And then, as I always do, I'm going to say, first of all, if I talked about you in this video, you are tagged, and additionally, I'm going to tag some people in the notes below, as I always do. So, as always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.